On the night of August 17, 2022, a heinous act shattered the Hillcrest community, leaving them reeling and exposing the dark underbelly of family dysfunction and deadly manipulation. Caleb Ruffalo was the golden boy, handsome, successful, and recently married to the beautiful Aya Landon. They were the couple everyone aspired to be. Their love story, the stuff of local legend. Caleb's mother, Abigail Ruffalo, was a pillar of the community, known for her charity work and impeccable taste. From the outside they seemed like the perfect family, but appearances can be deceiving. Caleb Ruffalo was born and raised in Hillcrest, the only child of Abigail and the late Gregory Ruffalo. From an early age it was clear that Caleb was destined for greatness, at least in the eyes of his doting mother. Abigail Ruffalo had always been a force to be reckoned with. The daughter of one of Hillcrest's founding families, she carried herself with an air of superiority that both intimidated and fascinated her neighbors. When she married Gregory Ruffalo, a promising young lawyer, it seemed like the perfect match. But Gregory's untimely death when Caleb was just 7, left Abigail a widow, intensifying her already fierce devotion to her only child. Abigail's love was all-encompassing, bordering on obsessive. She micromanaged every aspect of his life, from his clothes to his friends to his extracurricular activities. In high school, Caleb was an athlete and top student, but those who knew him well saw the toll his mother's expectations took on him. Jasper, Caleb's childhood best friend, later recalled, "There were times when I'd see this look in Caleb's eyes like he was drowning and couldn't call for help, but then he'd shake it off and be the perfect son again." It wasn't until Caleb left for college that he began to taste true independence. At the university he flourished, discovering a passion for environmental law that would shape his future career. It was also where he met Aya Landon, a vivacious art history major with a quick wit and a dazzling smile. Their romance was the stuff of rom-coms, the charming somewhat sheltered boy from a small town, swept off his feet by the free-spirited city girl. Harriet challenged Caleb in ways he'd never experienced before, encouraging him to question his assumptions and explore the world beyond Hillcrest borders. For Caleb, it was love at first sight. For Abigail, it was a threat to everything she had built. When Caleb brought Aya home to Hillcrest for the first time, the tension was palpable. Abigail's smile never reached her eyes as she appraised the young woman who had captured her son's heart. Sharia, for her part, did her best to win over her boyfriend's mother. But it quickly became clear that nothing she did would ever be good enough. Despite Abigail's thinly veiled disapproval, Caleb and Aya's relationship blossomed. They married in a lavish ceremony 2 years after graduation, with all of Hillcrest in attendance. As Caleb kissed his bride, onlookers would later swear they saw a shadow cross Abigail's face. The newlyweds settled in Hillcrest, where Caleb joined a prestigious law firm, and Aya took a job curating the local art museum. From the outside, they seemed to have it all: successful careers, a beautiful home, and a love that appeared unshakable. But beneath the surface, the seeds of discord were already taking root, nurtured by the relentless machinations of a woman who refused to let go of her son. For the first few years of their marriage, Caleb and Aya Ruffalo were the toast of Hillcrest. They were young, beautiful, and successful, the embodiment of the American dream. Their home on Willow Creek Lane became a hub for dinner parties and charity events, with Aya's artistic flair and Caleb's easy charm making them the perfect host. Professionally, they were equally impressive. Caleb quickly made a name for himself at Hillcrest, specializing in environmental law cases that often put him at odds with big corporations. His passionate advocacy and sharp legal mind earned him the respect of colleagues and opponents alike. Aya, meanwhile, breathed new life into the art museum, curating exhibits that drew visitors from all over the state and put their small town on the cultural map. Eliza, owner of the local bakery and a close friend of the couple, remembered those early days fondly. They were like something out of a movie. The way they looked at each other even after years of marriage, it was magical. We all wanted what they had. But as with all things that seemed too good to be true, cracks began to appear in the Ruffalos' perfect facade. Observant neighbors noticed the increasing frequency of Abigail Ruffalo's visits to her son's home, often arriving unannounced and staying for hours. Aurea, always polite but clearly strained, would paste on a smile as her mother-in-law critiqued everything from her housekeeping to her career choices. Caleb, caught between his wife and the woman who had shaped his entire existence, often found himself playing peacemaker. He'd soothe Aurea's hurt feelings after particularly cutting remarks from Abigail, then turn around and defend his mother's intentions to his wife. It was a delicate balancing act, and one that was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. Friends began to notice subtle changes in the couple's dynamics. Aurea, once vivacious and outgoing, grew quieter at social gatherings, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Caleb, for his part, threw himself into his work with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Late nights at the office became more frequent, as did the furrow on his brow when he thought no one was looking. To the casual observer, the Ruffalos were still the golden couple of Hillcrest, but those who looked closer could see the hairline fractures forming in their once unbreakable bond. Fractures that would soon split wide open under the relentless pressure of a mother's twisted love. The transformation of Caleb Ruffalo from doting husband to suspicious, paranoid spouse didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual process, a slow poisoning of the mind, orchestrated with chilling precision by the one person he trusted above all others: his mother. Abigail had always been a master of subtle manipulation, and she put all her skills to work in her campaign to drive a wedge between her son and his wife. It started innocuously enough. A casual mention of how late Aurea was working at the museum, a seemingly offhand comment about the handsome new donor who seemed so taken with her daughter-in-law's expertise. At first, Caleb brushed off these remarks. He trusted Aurea implicitly and knew how dedicated she was to her work, but Abigail was patient. She knew that doubt once planted has a way of taking root and growing in even the most fertile soil of love and trust. As weeks turned into months, Abigail's insinuations became more pointed. She'd call Caleb at odd hours, voice laden with concern, to report that she'd driven by the house and noticed Aurea's car was gone. Or she'd mention almost as an afterthought that she'd seen Aurea having lunch with a male colleague. Their heads bent close together in what looked like an intimate conversation. Each seed of doubt she planted found patches in Caleb's mind, fed by his own insecurities and the stress of his demanding career. He began to notice things he'd overlooked before. The way Aurea's phone would sometimes buzz late at night, the new clothes she'd bought for work, the vague answer she gave when he asked about her day. Rosalind Patel, a paralegal at Caleb's firm, later recalled to the police about the subtle changes she observed in her colleague. Caleb had always been focused, but suddenly he seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly and disappearing for long lunches. I remember one day, I overheard him on the phone with his mother. And the look on his face, it was like he'd seen a ghost. As Caleb's suspicions grew, so did the distance between him and Aurea. The easy intimacy they had once shared gave way to stilted conversations and long silences. Aurea, sensing her husband's withdrawal but unsure of its cause, tried to bridge the growing gap between them. She suggested vacations, date nights, couples therapy, anything to recapture the closeness they had lost. But Caleb, his mind clouded by doubt and his ear filled with his mother's poisonous whispers, interpreted Aurea's efforts as attempts to assuage her guilty conscience. Every loving gesture became suspect. Every explanation of potential lie. In the echoing halls of the Ruffalo house, a clock was ticking down to tragedy, its ominous rhythm drowned out by the sound of a family falling apart. As Caleb's suspicions reached a fever pitch, Abigail Ruffalo set in motion the most audacious and horrifying phase of her plan. No longer content with mere insinuations, she embarked on an elaborate scheme to fabricate concrete evidence of Aria's infidelity. Evidence so compelling that it would shatter the last vestiges of trust between husband and wife. Abigail's first step was to create a digital trail of deception. Using her considerable financial resources, she hired a skilled hacker from the dark web to infiltrate Aria's phone and email accounts. This shadowy figure, known only by the alias Phantom, worked tirelessly to construct a false narrative of betrayal. Fabricated text messages appeared on Aria's phone, detailing clandestine meetings and passionate encounters with a fictional lover. Emails with suggestive subject lines and cryptic content materialized in her inbox. Even Aria's social media accounts were subtly altered, with likes and comments on an attractive male colleague's post, backdated to create the illusion of a long-standing flirtation, but Abigail knew that digital evidence alone might not be enough. She needed physical proof, tangible items that Caleb could see and touch, to drive home the reality of his wife's supposed betrayal and her Liam Howard. A down on his luck actor Abigail had met at a local theater production. Charismatic but struggling to make ends meet, Liam was the perfect unwitting accomplice in Abigail's scheme. She approached him with what seemed like an innocent request to pose for a few innocent photos with a local artist, Aria, for a community project. Liam, flattered by the attention and eager for the promised payment, agreed without hesitation. Over the course of several weeks, Abigail orchestrated chance encounters between Liam and Aria at the museum, at local cafes, even on the street. Each time she was there, hidden from view, snapping photos that, when taken out of context, could be interpreted as evidence of a budding romance. As a final touch, Abigail purchased items she knew would inflame Caleb's jealousy. A man's watch. Not his style, but expensive and engraved with a lover's message. Hotel receipts for rooms never actually booked, a scrap of paper with a lipstick kiss, and an unfamiliar phone number. These items were carefully planted around the Ruffalo house. The watch accidentally dropped behind a dresser. The receipt stuffed in a rarely used desk drawer. The lipstick paper hidden in the pages of one of Aria's art books. Throughout this elaborate deception, Abigail maintained an outward appearance of concern and support. To the outside world, she was the picture of a caring mother-in-law, expressing worry over the apparent distance growing between Caleb and Aria. This public persona served a dual purpose. It deflected any potential suspicion from herself, while also reinforcing the narrative of Aria's guilt in the minds of those around them. As Abigail's web of lies grew ever more complex, she remained eerily calm, meticulously checking and double-checking every aspect of her plan. She was so consumed by her goal of separating Caleb from Aria that she never stopped to consider the potentially devastating consequences of her actions. In her journal later discovered by investigators, Abigail wrote, "He will thank me for saving him from her clutches." The stage was set, the players unknowingly in position. All that remained was for Abigail to present her evidence to Caleb and watch as her carefully constructed house of cards came crashing down around them all. August 17, 2022, dawned like any other summer day in Hillcrest. The air was thick with humidity, promising afternoon thunderstorms. Caleb Ruffalo left for work early. His goodbye to Aria perfunctory and cold. Aria, her heart heavy with the weight of their unspoken issues, busied herself with preparations for an upcoming exhibition at the museum. Neither of them could have imagined the storm that was about to break over their lives. At precisely 2:17 p.m., Abigail Ruffalo called her son, her voice trembling with what seemed like genuine distress. "Caleb," she said, "you need to come home. There's something you have to see. It's about Aria. Please hurry, Caleb." His mind immediately jumping to the worst conclusions. Left work without a word to his colleagues. He broke several speed limits on his way home. his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He found Abigail waiting for him in the driveway, her face a mask of sorrow and sympathy. Inside, she led him to the dining room table where she had artfully arranged her collected evidence of Aria's infidelity. For nearly an hour, Abigail walked Caleb through her fabricated proof, weaving a tale of betrayal so convincing that it shattered the last remnants of his trust. She showed him the doctored photos, the fake text messages, the planted items. Each piece of evidence driving the knife of betrayal deeper into his heart. "Caleb, I'm so sorry," Abigail said, her eyes brimming with crocodile tears. "I didn't want to believe it either. But you deserve to know the truth. You deserve better than this." As Abigail's words echoed in his ears, something inside Caleb snapped. Years of pent-up insecurity, of feeling not quite good. Enough came rushing to the surface. The man who prided himself on his logical mind and calm demeanor was gone, replaced by a creature of pure primal rage. When Aria returned home at 6:45 p.m., she found Caleb waiting for her. His eyes wide, his body trembling with barely contained fury. The confrontation that followed was brutal and swift. Caleb hurled accusations at his bewildered wife, each word laced with venom and hurt. Aria, caught completely off guard, tried desperately to make sense of her husband's tirade. She denied the allegations, begged Caleb to listen to reason, to believe in their love, but Caleb was beyond reason, beyond love. In his mind, twisted by his mother's lies, Aria's denials were just further proof of her deceit. What happened next occurred in a matter of minutes, but would haunt the residents of Hillcrest for years to come. In a blind rage, Caleb lashed out physically at Aria for the first time in their relationship. He pushed her head striking the corner of the marble kitchen island with a sickening crack. Aria crumpled to the floor, a thin line of blood trickling from her temple. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Then, as the reality of what he'd done came crashing down on him, Caleb fell to his knees beside his wife's motionless body. As the police led a shell-shocked Caleb away in handcuffs, Abigail Ruffalo stood in the shadows of the house she had so meticulously filled with lies. Her face was a mask of horrified concern, but deep in her eyes a flicker of triumph could be seen. A triumph that would prove to be devastatingly short-lived. The news of Aria Ruffalo's death sent shockwaves through Hillcrest, the community that had once looked up to Caleb and Aria as the perfect couple, now found itself grappling with the ugly reality of domestic violence and murder. In the immediate aftermath, Caleb Ruffalo was arrested. He offered no resistance seemingly, in a state of shock as he was led away from the home he had shared with Aria. His initial statements to the police were disjointed and confused, alternating between professions of love for Aria and accusations of her infidelity. The investigation, led by Detective Image and Quality of the Oregon State Police, quickly focused on unraveling the events that had led to this tragic outcome. Quality, a veteran investigator with a reputation for thoroughness, sensed early on that there was more to this case than a simple crime of passion. As news crews descended on Hillcrest, turning the quiet town into the center of a media frenzy, Detective Quality and her team began the painstaking process of piecing together Caleb and Aria's final days. They interviewed friends, colleagues, and neighbors, building a picture of a couple that had seemed perfect on the surface, but had been struggling with growing tensions. One of the first red flags came during the interview with Eliza Corradas, the local baker who had been close to the couple. She mentioned offhandedly that she had seen Abigail Ruffalo at the Ruffalo residence on the day of the murder, leaving just before Caleb arrived home. This contradicted Abigail's initial statement that she had only come to the house after receiving a distress call from her son. As they dug deeper, more inconsistencies began to emerge. The evidence of Aria's infidelity that Caleb cited in His rambling confessions didn't match up with her known whereabouts and activities. Co-workers at the museum vouched for Aria's dedication to her work and her evident love for her husband, painting a picture at odds with that of a cheating spouse. Perhaps most puzzling too. Detective quality was the role of Abigail Ruffolo while she presented herself as a grieving mother-in-law. Supportive of her son, but devastated by the loss of Oria. There was something in her demeanor that set off quality's finely tuned investigators' instincts. Why had Abigail been at the house earlier that day? Why did her account of events leading up to the murder seem so carefully rehearsed? And why did Abigail seem more concerned with protecting her son than mourning the loss of her daughter-in-law? As the investigation entered its second week, detective quality couldn't shake the feeling that Abigail Ruffolo held the key to unraveling this tragic mystery. Little did she know how deep the deception went, or how far Abigail would go to protect her web of lies. Detective Image and Quality had built her career on an uncanny ability to see patterns where others saw only chaos. As she stood in front of the evidence board in the Hillcrest police station, that ability was being put to the ultimate test. The board was amazed of photograph statements and timelines all centered around the smiling faces of Caleb and Oria Ruffolo, but it was another face that kept drawing Quality's attention. The carefully composed visage of Abigail Ruffolo. Quality decided to take a different approach. Instead of focusing solely on the day of the murder, she began to look further back, tracing the deterioration of Caleb and Aria's relationship. It was during this process that she noticed a curious pattern. Each major argument between the couple, each instance of Caleb's growing suspicion, seemed to be preceded by an interaction with Abigail. Phone records showed long calls between mother and son, often late at night or early in the morning. Witness statements placed Abigail at her near the Ruffolo residence, with increasing frequency in the months leading up to the murder. But the real breakthrough came when Quality decided to look into Abigail's financial records, hidden beneath layers of clever accounting. Was evidence of payments to offshore account. One payment made just days before the murder was to an entity known only as Phantom. Quality's team traced this payment to a known hacker, one with a reputation for being able to fabricate digital evidence. This discovery led to a deeper dive into the proof of Aria's infidelity that had driven Caleb to his fatal actions. As they examined Aria's phone and email records, inconsistencies began to emerge. Messages that Caleb claimed to have seen were nowhere to be found in the phone's memory. Emails appeared to have been inserted into Aria's account from an external source, but perhaps the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. Liam Howard, racked with guilt over his unwitting role in the tragedy, came forward to confess his part in Abigail's scheme. His testimony provided the missing link, explaining how Abigail had manufactured the appearance of an affair where none existed. Liam Howard sat in the interrogation room, his once handsome face haggard with guilt and lack of sleep. Across from him, Detective Quali waited patiently as the young actor gathered the courage to tell his story. Abigail was so convincing. Liam said, running a shaky hand through his hair. She said it was to help her daughter-in-law feel more confident in social situations. As Liam's story unfolded, the full scope of Abigail's deception became clear. She had used Liam as an unwitting pawn, carefully orchestrating chance encounters with Oria and documenting them for later use. The photos she took were then skillfully edited to create the illusion of an illicit affair. It wasn't until Liam saw the news of Aria's death that he realized the horrifying consequences of his involvement. Overwhelmed by guilt, he had initially gone into hiding, terrified of what might happen if the truth came out. But as the days passed, the weight of his conscience became too much to bear. I know I should have come forward sooner, Liam said, tears streaming down his face. I was just so scared, but I couldn't live with myself knowing what happened to Oria. She was innocent. She didn't deserve this. Detective Qualley listened intently, knowing that Liam's testimony would be crucial in bringing Abigail Ruffolo to justice. Abigail entered the interrogation room with the same poise and confidence she had displayed throughout the investigation. "Mrs. Ruffolo, thank you for coming in." Qualley began, her tone deceptively casual. "We just have a few more questions about the day of Aria's death." For the next hour, Qualley led Abigail through a carefully constructed series of questions, slowly but surely backing her into a corner. She presented phone records showing Abigail's presence at the house earlier than she had claimed, financial documents linking her to the hacker known as Phantom, and finally, Liam Howard's damning testimony. In that moment of unguarded emotion, Abigail sealed her own fate. Her impassioned defense became a confession, pouring out a torrent of justifications and accusations. She spoke of her fear of losing Caleb, of her certainty that Aria would eventually hurt him, of her belief that she alone knew what was best for her son. In the weeks that followed, the true extent of Abigail's machinations came to light. The community of Hillcrest, already reeling from Aria's death, was forced to confront the darkness that had been lurking beneath their picturesque small-town veneer. The trials of Caleb and Abigail Ruffolo captivated the community, shining a spotlight on the quiet town of Hillcrest and the tragedy that had unfolded there. The courthouse was packed each day, with reporters and curious onlookers jostling for a glimpse of the mother and son whose actions had resulted in the death of an innocent woman. Caleb's trial came first, his defense team, recognizing the overwhelming evidence of his physical act, opted for a plea of temporary insanity, arguing that the elaborate deception orchestrated by his mother had driven him to a mental breaking point. After weeks of testimony from mental health experts and character witnesses, the jury found Caleb guilty of manslaughter rather than murder. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 10. Abigail's trial, by contrast, was a study in calculated malice. The prosecution painted a damning picture of a manipulative, obsessive mother, whose actions directly led to the death of her daughter-in-law, despite her attempts to portray herself as a concerned parent who had simply gone too far. The jury was unconvinced. Abigail Ruffolo was found guilty on all counts, including conspiracy to commit murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentencing brought little comfort to those most affected by the tragedy. Aria's family, present throughout both trials, spoke of the void left by their daughter's death and the difficulty of finding forgiveness in the face of such calculated cruelty. For the residents of Hillcrest, the end of the trials brought a mix of relief and lingering unease. The picturesque facade of their town had been permanently altered. The illusion of perfect safety shattered by the knowledge that such darkness could exist in their midst. The Ruffolo family tragedy serves as a somber reminder that truth, once shattered, can have consequences far beyond imagination. A lesson etched indelibly into the heart of a small Oregon town and into the annals of criminal history.